Hello, my beautiful buds. Welcome back to my channel, Sprouts with Joy. My name is Joy, and if you like to talk about plants, you're in the right place. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 philodendron, and I've been wanting to make this video for months and months and months, but I've had the hardest time discerning what my top 5 philodendron actually are. I have probably like a good 8 or 9 philodendron on a list that, I don't know, they kept on like going back and forth for a while, but this top 5 list has remained consistent for enough time that I feel comfortable actually sharing it and putting it out there. But obviously I reserve the right to fall in love with different philodendron and have things move around over time. So maybe I'll make a new top 5 philodendron video a couple years from now, but I think, at least for now, as of right now, these are the philodendron in my collection that I am just absolutely head over heels over and obsessed with. And they look so good and they've grown so well for me that I just can't not talk about them. The first one is right behind me, and it's my philodendron mamei, and I don't think anyone is surprised about this. Look at this plant. Like, this is my pride and joy in my plant collection, period. Even just the shape of this plant, the way that it sits on the shelf here, and I mean, it takes up a lot of space, but it's just glorious. I mean, look at, this is the most recent leaf that it's put out for me, and it's just immaculate. I love how pillowy it is. It's honestly quite massive, like, hello, it is bigger than my head. And look at just the silvery markings on it. Oh my gosh, it's just freaking gorgeous. I knew from the beginning that this would be on the list, let's be real. I mean, this was the only one that I was like 100% positive on having on my top 5. I didn't actually rank them like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, it's no particular order technically speaking, but if I did have to pick a top philodendron, that is my absolute favorite philodendron of all time, it would have to be the mamei. I've had this plant for a long time. It was one of the first plants that I bought after starting this YouTube channel. So I think that I've had it for about 2.5 years, and it did not grow perfectly well the entire time that I had it. There were actually several moments in time where I was really paranoid about this plant. I did actually spend quite a lot of money for it, the most money that I've ever spent on a plant ever at that point and since. It was definitely over $100. When I first got this plant, it wasn't necessarily a little seedling or anything like that. It wasn't quite that dramatic of a transformation, but I'll try to find some footage to share with you. It was in probably a 5-inch pot and a round pot, and I mean, the leaves were all pretty small. Like, they were this size or smaller. I had found it on Facebook Marketplace locally. So this plant really embodied the thrill of the hunt of the time, which, I mean, I think that there still is a sense of that thrill of finding a new plant that you've been looking for in an unlikely spot. Something about it was different back in like 2020, 2021, that era of plants, if you will, and that's right around the time that I got this plant. I think it will always be special to me for that reason, that I found it during a very nostalgic time for plant collectors, but I'm also just so proud and impressed with how well that it's grown over the years. At this point, it is very well established, so I feel like I'm not quite as worried about it anymore, but like I mentioned before, there were definitely some phases where I was so paranoid about this plant. It did get spider mites a handful of times, and that just absolutely freaked me out because some of my first experiences with spider mites were associated with this plant, and I was like, I cannot lose this plant. And I'm really glad that I didn't, and that the treatments worked. And honestly, you can't even really tell that it had spider mites. I mean, it has a few imperfections from over the years of, I don't know, maybe underwatering or just random things, nutrient deficiencies, but the most recent leaves have been quite flawless. But overall, I mean, cosmetically, this plant I think is really quite good looking, even if it has gone through some bouts of difficult things. But at this point, I can confidently say I'm very comfortable with where it's at, and I'm not really worried about it, and it's just trucking along. I did really want to feature this plant before I have to chop it, because honestly, I'm gonna say in like the next week or so, I'm gonna have to chop it up. I'm probably not gonna chop it up into tiny pieces. It is a crawler, which makes kind of propagation, or at least extending it a little bit easier. But I think that I am going to mourn the way that it looks right now, because like this right here is perfection. Like I want it to stay this way forever. But I'm gonna have to probably chop it right around the middle and start it over. I'll just bring it back to the far side of the pot so it can kind of start crawling again, and then, you know, this portion right here, that part I'll probably chop up. But you know, it should have a pretty decent root system already because it is crawling along the soil, and so it kind of propagates itself, honestly, as it goes. It's kind of like having a moss pole, but obviously it's growing horizontally rather than vertically. I will say I am quite excited to kind of dig into the soil and even see what the root system looks like. I only repotted this plant the one time when it needed to be put into a like rectangular planter. So yeah, I honestly have no idea what to expect, but I really hope that it's doing well down there. I mean, I can only assume that it is because it's been growing so consistently for me and putting out bigger and bigger leaves. As far as care goes, I mean, it gets pretty decent light. This room is a fairly bright room because it has a south-facing window and a west-facing window, but it's not directly in front of either of those windows. It's kind of equidistant from both of them. And it is an ambient humidity, which right now in like the cooler months tends to hover around 35 to 45% in my home. I try to keep up with the fertilizing once a month, and I fully saturate the soil with water probably once every week and a half or 2 weeks or so, because there's a lot of soil in here and it retains moisture for a while. The next philodendron I'm going to talk about is my philodendron Florida Ghost. I watered it this morning, so it is incredibly heavy right now. I do wish it were just a little bit more stable. It's just on like a bamboo stake right now, so I don't know. Sometimes it's a little bit wobbly when I try to move it around, but oh my gosh, I'm just like staring at it in the viewfinder, and I am so happy with how this plant has turned out and how it's growing right now. I just think that the shape of it is so satisfying to look at. If you don't know, I recently made like a planty makeover video where over the course of maybe, what was it, 3 or 4 months, I propagated some plants, potted them together, you know, zhuzhed them up and made them a little bit nicer than what they were before, and this philodendron Florida Ghost was one of them. So in that video, I had propagated kind of a whole nother philodendron Florida Ghost plant, and the mother plant was getting really, really sparse, so I decided to pot them together. So down here is kind of that second plant. Obviously up here is the mother plant. And yeah, I'm really proud of how it's turned out so far, and I think that the plant is really, really happy. In general, I have always loved the philodendron Florida Ghost. I'm obviously pretty obsessed with its growth habit and the fact that the new leaves come out a very ghostly pale color, which unfortunately, I don't think that I have any super fresh leaves to show you that like very pale color that it's known for. I'm trying to see if there are any. I mean, this one has kind of retained some of that almost like mintiness, but this one has as well. But most of the leaves at this point have already kind of hardened off to more of a green color, so that's my one regret. I do wish that I had filmed this video while it had a more bright, ghostly color. I have actually been pretty tempted to put this plant into brighter light, specifically because I've heard that that can really draw out more white looking leaves when they first emerge. And the leaves of this plant, when they've been emerging, they definitely have been emerging a more like light green, but not exactly like a super ghostly white either. So I don't know. I'm happy with how it looks in its current spot. I could see myself switching it up just to see if it has an effect on the plant, the way that it grows, and if it'll give me some more of those really cool leaves. But even beyond its habit of light colored emergent leaves, I love the shape of the leaves. This kind of philodendron pedatum shape. Just this shape is absolutely delightful, and I even love its name, Florida Ghost, because I am from Florida, so I actually love all of the Florida philodendron. So philodendron Florida is like the green one, and then Florida Ghost is this one. And maybe someday I'll get a Florida Beauty in my collection. I feel like they're still pretty expensive, and I don't even know that I want to get many more philodendron just because they take up so much space. But that's still a plant that I would definitely consider getting because it's just gorgeous. But yes, it's just so unique. Even the petioles, taking a closer look at them, Like, look at how red they are. Just down to kind of the granular details of the plant. They're red and bumpy. And I just love, oh, you just hit me in the face. And I just love little details like that. And that's just one of the small things that kind of puts this a step above some other philodendron in my collection. There are a lot of really interesting and unique facets to this plant that I don't see in a whole lot of other plants. I've also found this plant to be pretty easy to propagate personally. So I have been able to propagate several pieces off of the plant and give them away to friends, which I specifically had a friend of mine that, I mean, philodendron Florida Ghost was on her wish list, and I was able to share it with her. And that in and of itself, like, I love it when plants are easier to propagate and easier to share with people, because unfortunately not all plants really take well to that. So that's obviously also bonus points, and I love that I've been able to have that experience and that it's been relatively easy to do with this plant. Overall, I'm excited to see how this plant grows in the future and how it fills in, and maybe I'll even take some more propagations and add more into the pot, because there's certainly room left in this pot for more Florida Ghost. Alphonse wants to say hi. My sweet boy. Now that I've acknowledged him, he's not going to leave me alone. He's my snuggle buddy that loves attention. The next philodendron on my list is my philodendron gigas, which you all probably also saw this one coming. I talk about this plant on my channel quite a bit. And this is the first philodendron on my list that is on a moss pole. And actually, I feel like this was my first real true moss pole success story. I could be wrong, but I feel like this was one of the first plants of mine that I put on my own custom moss poles that I now use for just about all of my plants that I put on moss poles. Clearly, it was very fruitful. Like, look at how much these leaves have sized up. So I don't know if you can really see on the bottom. When I first got this plant, it was tiny. Just absolutely tiny. I think I got it only just over a year ago. It was not that long ago. Like, do you see this leaf? That's pretty representative of what the leaves looked like when I first got it. And it had just a handful of leaves. So I'll try to also find footage of that. I'm gonna do a lot of footage hunting for this video. Sorry, editing me. And as a side note, this plant is just a tiny smidge thirsty. You can kind of tell the leaves are curling in an ever so slight amount, and it's fairly dry, at least the moss pole is. But I'm due to water it tomorrow, so it's just kind of on the cusp there. First of all, I am just obsessed with how far this plant has come and how rewarding it has been to grow. I mean, I was not expecting the leaves to size up as dramatically as they have and so quickly. But they did. This plant really took to the moss pole and absolutely loved it. And it even rooted into the moss pole. Let me see if you'll be able to tell what I'm talking about. It's kind of hard to tell because the moss is a little bit green and the roots also look green. But it definitely rooted into this pole quite a bit, especially early on. Like even right here. Do you see that? That's like one big fat juicy root right there. And I'm honestly so obsessed with these leaves. Just, this is the dark and velvety leaf of your dreams. Like if you love dark foliage, this is some of the darkest foliage that you're gonna get. I mean, honestly, it's such a vibe, it's a mood. And in certain lights, it's gonna be kind of hard to show you, but in certain lights, there's kind of a sheen to the plant that is so gorgeous and shimmery and like ever so slightly iridescent, especially with the emergent leaves. The emergent leaves come out just this burnt orange looking color, and it's just, I so appreciate how it looks. I did recently chop this plant because when I removed it from the greenhouse cabinet, the first leaf that came out was really iffy and deformed, and then after that the next leaf was really rather small. Like it was serviceable, but I was like, you know what, I want to chop this plant because I have some friends that I would like to give propagations to anyways. So I did chop it, and it looks like, I actually just noticed this today when I grabbed this plant, it looks like that there might be a new little growth point starting. The first leaf to emerge after chopping a plant like this, like making a top cut. Normally I actually just chop up the entire plant and start from the ground up, but I just didn't have the heart to do that with this plant. I just love it too much and I'm too attached to it. But yeah, the first leaf is generally a little bit on the small side, so I'm kind of expecting that it's going to be warming up and figuring itself out, but hopefully from there it'll be happy enough and kind of keep growing at the same pace that it was before. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. It's kind of hard to say. It kind of saves up a lot of space and it's honestly just so elegant. The next plant is my philodendron atabapoense. And okay, I originally got this plant a year and a half ago. I think it'll be 2 years this summer. So yeah, a year and a half ago. And it was already on a moss pole, already fairly mature, and was honestly growing really, really well. But eventually it was reaching the top of the moss pole and I didn't really want to continue the same style of moss pole that I had purchased it as. It was just like one of those wire moss poles. So I decided to chop it up and start it over. And as a result, I actually have quite a lot of atabapoense plants, but it took a while for me to find a groove with atabapoense and decide exactly how I wanted to grow it. So even to this day, I still have a few duplicates of this plant, but this I think is officially my favorite rendition of the plant. And this is gonna be the plant that I like keep for myself. Now, admittedly, I've always objectively adored the atabapoense, but there have been some times where atabapoense in my collection. Oh, do you wanna say hi? Come here. Say hi.
Hi.
Mommy's filming a video.
That camera's hunting something I can see and test the video.
Yeah, it's a video of you, but you can actually see yourself right there. Do you see yourself?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the philodendron atabapoense.
Yeah.
Can you say philodendron
Philodendron
atabapoense?
atabapoense.
Good job. That's a hard word, huh? What color are the backs of the leaves? What's that color?
Red.
Yeah, the backs of the leaves are red.
And green.
Yeah, and there's green on the front. Yeah.
And what's that inside the fish?
Well, it's just green because of algae, I think. Or sometimes the moss actually comes back to life. And when it does that, it turns green. Anyway, I don't even remember what I was saying.
What's inside the fish?
So, objectively, I really have always loved this plant, but subjectively, I did not always enjoy the atabapoense plants that I had in my collection until now. Like, this is the one that I love and will forever love because it has just been growing so well. I mean, first of all, look at this newest leaf that it has put out. It's massive. It's still hardening off, so I think it's still gonna grow. As my wonderful daughter mentioned, the backs of the leaves are red, which is like my favorite attribute that a plant can have, is having red backs to the leaves. It has always been my favorite thing, and I just love the leaf shape. I love how supple it is, and I love the shade of green that it is too. It's more of a muted shade of green, so I just love everything about it. Okay, are you tired? I think you need to take a nap.
I need help.
I'm gonna get her a snack and get her down for a nap, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, this plant has rooted into the pole incredibly well. Like, just look at these juicy roots. I am so shocked and impressed. And I can only imagine, like, with such great roots in the pole, this is only the beginning. Like, I can totally see this next leaf that's kind of starting right here in this caterpillar. I can imagine it being remarkably large solely because it's getting so much like extra nutrients from rooting into the moss pole so vigorously. Yeah, I'm honestly so excited to see where this plant goes. I can't even fit this entire plant in the frame. Wow, okay. My next and final philodendron that I just love is my philodendron verrucosum, which I never thought that I would say. I think that out of all the plants on this list, this one is the most recent one to my collection. I think that I've had it for less than a year, but it has already grown tremendously. I mean, truly, I'm gonna have to insert some like before and after footage because I'm so impressed with how well this has grown. I never thought that this plant would grow well for me. I had heard so many people having negative experiences with this plant, but I have had nothing but positive experiences personally. Thankfully, I have not encountered any pests yet on this plant, and I did have it in the greenhouse cabinet for the majority of the time that I've owned it, but it has absolutely been thriving on this moss pole. I am completely obsessed with the way that these leaves are. They're velvety and gorgeous, and the backs of the leaves also have that like redness to them that, as I've mentioned before, I really love. And the leaves kind of come in almost chartreuse. This is the newest leaf, and the chartreuse is like just now fading off. But you know, the redness and the bright green is very, very pronounced with this plant. I also have just multiple plants on this pole, so it's just incredibly, incredibly full. And so I've got, I think this is a brand new leaf kind of farther down the pole. And I can only imagine just how gorgeous and large this plant is going to get with time. Another characteristic of the verrucosum that I am obsessed with is how it has slightly fuzzy petioles. Now, these are not the fuzziest of fuzzy petioles. I mean, there are some plants that have way fuzzier petioles, but this is a characteristic found in plants that every time I see it, I'm obsessed with it. I just think it's the coolest looking thing ever. Now, I did consider putting my philodendron squamiferum on this list. It was like a high contender because it has grown so well for me, and it has very, very, very aggressively fuzzy petioles. But this one won out because it has so many other characteristics that I also love. Another plant that I considered putting on this list, but I kind of put the verrucosum instead, was the philodendron splendid, which is actually right here. So we'll go ahead and grab it. I mean, this one has been growing quite well for me, and I think that it has really elegant leaves. They're really, really soft and velvety, and it does have like a very slight red back. If you don't know, actually, the splendid is a hybrid of the verrucosum and the melanochrysum. So there are a lot of shared characteristics between the two plants, and I love how delicate these leaves look. However, there's just no match. I mean, I think that someday, like, this plant has the potential to get to the point that the verrucosum is at, but it's just not there yet. And so I don't know that they can really compare fully in terms of, you know, this plant is just so full and massive. Like, this is the tallest moss pole that I have in my collection at the moment. Yeah, once I put them side by side, I realized, okay, yeah, no, this one is really, really good. Actually, I do want to pick up the camera really fast so that you can actually see the top of the plant because it was cut off in the frame. But yeah, this is what these top leaves here look like. This is the newest leaf on the top that's still hardening off. And yeah, I mean, it's quite tall and gorgeous, and it has a new leaf, or at least a caterpillar right here already that I'm so excited about. But like, look at how fuzzy it is right here on this newest leaf. Oh my gosh, it's just gorgeous. Well, that's all 5 philodendron, assuming I can count properly. Yeah, we're done. It's honestly always a joy to be talking about the plants that are growing well and are just looking gorgeous and that I genuinely enjoy having in my collection. That being said, while I was preparing for this video, I definitely had in my mind a list of philodendron that were kind of on the bottom that I was not even considering for 1 second as one of my favorites. So do let me know if you want me to talk about my like bottom 5 philodendron. Now, to be fair, they are philodendron that I still have in my collection, so I don't necessarily hate them, but they're just, you know, my least favorite philodendron, or the ones that have given me some problems and that are a little bit exasperating. And yeah, I stubbornly cling to having them in my collection because there are some redemptive qualities that I appreciate about them. So yes, do let me know if you want to see that video, or if you want me to actually rank all of my philodendron in my collection, period, and that can be kind of my next philodendron collection video later this year. Let me know if you want that format, although I think that Wild Fern has already done that, so I don't know. I don't want to like steal her idea inadvertently. Oh well. Just let me know what you want to see from me and I'll do it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe. All those things are super, super helpful for my channel. And I hope that you have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye-bye!